The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the overhead lights and the distant echo of boots in the hallway. Dozens of elite soldiers sat in the steel gray chairs, their faces set, their backs straight, each one trained, tested, and proven in the field. At the front of the room stood a SEAL captain, battle-worn, calm, the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to command respect. He scanned the room slowly, his eyes pausing on each face, measuring them. Then he asked the question, "Any combat pilots here?" It wasn't casual. It wasn't small talk. That question meant something. Something big. The room went still. A few soldiers glanced at one another, uncertain. No one moved. Until someone stood. From the back of the room, a single figure rose quietly. No dramatic motion. No announcement. Just calm, deliberate movement. A woman. In uniform. With the quiet authority of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Every head turned. Some faces showed surprise. Others confusion. A few raised eyebrows. The silence deepened. The SEAL captain's eyes locked on hers. There was no judgment in his stare, just curiosity. He hadn't expected this. Neither had anyone else. Her name tag read, Thompson. Lieutenant Sarah Thompson. She was the only one standing. A woman? A combat pilot? The whispers started quietly. Some of these men had flown missions. Some had seen pilots in action. But few had ever served alongside a woman who claimed the title combat pilot. Fewer still had seen one stand alone in a room full of special forces. But Sarah stood like she'd done it before. Not just standing in rooms like this, but standing in fire. Standing in battle. Standing when no one else would. The SEAL captain gestured slightly, giving her permission to speak. But she didn't launch into a story. She didn't list her accomplishments. She simply said, "Yes, sir. I fly a TENS. Close air support. 3 deployments." That was it. 12 words. That's all she gave them. But for anyone who knew what that meant, those 12 words hit hard. Flying a TENS wasn't a desk job. It wasn't cargo runs or peaceful air patrols. It was frontline, low-altitude, close-in flying. The kind where you came home with holes in your wings, if you came home at all. 3 deployments meant she'd done it more than once. She'd gone back, voluntarily, into war zones. The room was still processing when the SEAL captain spoke again. "We've got a situation developing. Fast. We may need air cover. Real-time response. I need someone who can coordinate with boots on the ground. Someone who's done this before." He didn't ask her again. He didn't need to. Sarah didn't blink. "I'm ready, sir," she said. Her voice was quiet, but steady. No hesitation. No performance. Just a soldier reporting for duty. There was a shift in the room. Subtle, but real. Even the doubters leaned in now. She had everyone's attention, and she hadn't even told them her story yet. Not the missions. Not the near misses. Not the night she flew into a firefight to save a SEAL team cut off deep in enemy territory. That part would come later. But in that moment, in that silent room filled with warriors, Lieutenant Sarah Thompson didn't need to explain anything. She'd already said enough. She didn't always stand so easily. Years before that briefing room, Sarah Thompson sat in the back of a classroom at flight school, unnoticed. The only woman in a sea of uniforms. Most assumed she was logistics or maybe admin. No one asked. No one cared. She remembered the looks. Some curious. Some dismissive. One instructor didn't even hide his doubt. "You ever flown under fire, Thompson?" She hadn't. Not then. But she looked him in the eye and said, "I will." And she did. She pushed harder than most. Trained longer. Spent more hours in the simulator. Ran drills until her hands bled from the friction of the throttle. She didn't do it to prove anything to them. She did it because she knew what would come later. There'd be a day, someday, when someone's life would depend on her being ready. And when that day came, She wasn't going to flinch. The day came sooner than she expected. Her first deployment was to Kandahar. She was part of a close air support squadron flying A-10 Warthogs, the kind of aircraft built to get low, take fire, and hit hard. There was no glamour in it. No clean lines. Just steel, gunpowder, and grit. And heat. Always the heat. It was during her second week there that she got her first real call. Ground team pinned down. Coordinates sent. 2 pilots scrambled. One of them was Sarah. She remembered the moment she strapped into the cockpit. Her heart pounding. Hands slightly trembling. But once she took off, the world changed. The sky became quiet. Everything focused. Her voice calm as she radioed in. Razor 1 inbound. ETA 2 minutes. Hold your position. Below her, chaos. Small arms fire. RPG trails streaking through the night. Friendly forces cornered behind a crumbling wall, taking fire from 3 directions. She had a single pass. 1 shot to make it count. She adjusted altitude. Checked wind speed. Calculated angles in her head. Then she dove. The A-10 screamed through the valley. The GAU, 8 cannons spun up like thunder. She hit her mark. The enemy scattered. Silence returned. And then a voice crackled through her headset. Razor 1, you saved our lives tonight. It wasn't the last time she'd hear that. But the first time never leaves you. Back in Kandahar, she returned to base in silence. No applause. No speeches. Just a quiet nod from her co-pilot and a log entry that read, * mission successful. All friendlies accounted for, *. That was enough. She'd proved she could handle the pressure, that she could fly into fire and come back with her head high. But more than that, she proved something to herself. She didn't need to be loud. She didn't need to convince anyone. She just needed to keep showing up, again and again, mission after mission. And so she did. By the time she reached her 3rd deployment, Sarah Thompson had earned a reputation. Not flashy, not loud. But when the radios went silent and things got bad, really bad, someone always asked the same question. Is Thompson flying today? Because when she was, they felt safer. She didn't brag. She didn't walk with swagger. But those who had flown with her knew one thing. If she said she was ready, she meant it. And when she stood up in that briefing room years later, in front of the SEAL captain and a dozen men who didn't know her name, she already knew what they didn't. She'd been tested in ways they hadn't seen yet. And when the next mission came, the one no one wanted, she'd be the one flying into the fire. The SEAL captain didn't say much at first. He just studied her like a battlefield map, reading between the lines, trying to figure out what kind of soldier she really was. You could tell he'd seen things. Led missions that went sideways. Lost men. Trusted the wrong people. And now he was supposed to trust her. He asked one question. How close have you gotten? Sarah didn't blink. 120 feet, sir. Night op, Northern Helmand Province. We were coordinating with a ground team under direct fire. That answer changed something. Subtle but real. A few heads in the room turned. One of the younger SEALs leaned forward slightly. 120 feet in an A-10 wasn't flying. That was diving into the devil's mouth. Give me the short version, the captain said. What happened? Sarah looked ahead, steady. They were ambushed during an exfil. No satellite cover. Fog comms. I was airborne, called in to assist. Ground team gave me half a grid. Then their radio went dead. I dropped below the clouds. Picked up movement visually. Saw the muzzle flashes. I could hear the gunfire in my headset, through the team leader's open mic. She paused, not for effect, but to collect the moment. I went low. Marked the perimeter. Cleared a narrow window. Fired 2 bursts. Broke contact. Everyone got out. One of the men in the room exhaled softly, like he didn't realize he'd been holding his breath. The SEAL captain nodded once. And you didn't hesitate? No, sir. Hesitation costs lives. Another voice spoke up. It was a tall man with a deep scar across his jaw. You fly with emotion, Lieutenant. Sarah turned to face him. No, she said. I fly with clarity. It was quiet after that. But not uncomfortable. Just the kind of quiet that comes when people start re-evaluating everything they thought they knew. The captain stepped back slightly and pulled a laser pointer from his belt. A satellite map appeared on the screen behind him. He pointed to a red zone. We've got a recon team heading into this sector in under 48 hours. Intel says movement in the hills is heavier than we thought. Enemies got new weapons, better range. We need someone in the sky who can see what satellites can't. He turned to her again. This isn't routine. You'll be flying blind, relying on broken comms, tight windows, and no backup. Sarah didn't flinch. I've done more with less, sir. You'll be coordinating with my team on the ground. I don't have time for mistakes. You won't get any, she said. The captain paused. Then, for the first time, a flicker of something passed across his face. Respect. He turned back to the screen. Briefing at 0400. Gear up, all of you. Dismissed. Chairs scraped against the floor as the room stood and began to clear. Some of the SEALs glanced back at her, this time not with doubt, but curiosity. Maybe even admiration. She stood alone at the edge of the room, still in that same calm posture. Her eyes focused, already planning for the mission ahead. The captain walked past her, then stopped. You've seen fire, Lieutenant. Let's see if you can fly through hell. Sarah nodded. Wouldn't be the first time, sir. She hadn't always been this composed. There was a time when Sarah Thompson questioned everything. Not the mission, not the uniform, but whether she truly belonged in a world where every room seemed built for someone else. Every hallway echoed with voices that didn't sound like hers. Every challenge came with an extra weight she had to carry alone. In training, they called her ma'am with sarcasm. In the mess hall, they skipped her in conversations about combat. When she flew, they double-checked her logs, asked the same questions twice, just to be sure. She learned to answer with results, not words. The hardest part wasn't flying. It was walking into rooms where no one expected her to be the one flying at all. Her first deployment had been the test. She remembered walking across the tarmac in Kandahar, helmet under her arm, aircraft rumbling beside her. A male pilot turned to another and muttered, "Hope she knows where the trigger is." She did. She proved it 36 hours later, flying a support run that saved an entire convoy trapped under enemy fire. The after-action report said, pilot responded with precision and control. It didn't mention that she flew with a cracked canopy and 2 red warning lights blinking the entire time. She never asked for special treatment. She only asked for the chance to do the job. And she did it well, over and over. But every time she earned a little respect, she had to earn it again. New faces, new rooms, new doubt. Even now, back in that SEAL briefing room, with 3 tours under her belt and a dozen successful missions, she could feel it, the lingering question in some of their eyes. Not fear, not hate, just disbelief. And that was worse. They didn't think she was weak. They just didn't believe she belonged. But belief isn't required when the results are undeniable. The recon mission was just hours away now. She reviewed the intel, scanned the flight paths, memorized terrain features. The team on the ground would be moving through a narrow valley. Low visibility, unpredictable cover, and minimal support. There wouldn't be room for mistakes. At 0300, she suited up. Helmet, gloves, flight jacket, the familiar ritual. No music, no chatter, just muscle memory and quiet breathing. She walked the runway alone, the stars above her the only witness to the moment. Her A-10 sat waiting. Her bird, worn, scratched, patched in places that told stories no one else could read. She climbed the ladder, ran her checks, flipped switches she could find in the dark if she had to. At 0345, she was cleared for takeoff. As the engines roared to life and the ground faded below her, she felt it, that shift, that silence, that total focus. In the air, everything made sense. Doubt didn't exist at altitude. The mission started the moment her wheels left the ground. Below her, the recon team was already moving somewhere in the hills. No room for errors. No time for second-guessing. She tuned into the comms. Static. Then a faint voice. Eagle 1, this is Hammer. Moving to Point Delta. Visibility low. Terrain uneven. Possible contact ahead. She responded instantly. Copy that, Hammer. I'm eyes on. Stay sharp. You're not alone up there. And they weren't. Because above them, hidden in the night sky, flew a woman they once underestimated. And tonight, she would prove, once again, that belonging isn't granted. It's earned. The valley was darker than the satellite images suggested. From 2,000 feet up, Sarah could barely make out the outlines of the ridgelines. Trees scattered like broken teeth. Shadows that moved but weren't alive. Her fingers adjusted the throttle with practiced ease, eyes flicking between instruments and terrain. She wasn't nervous. She was locked in. Below her, the recon team was deep into enemy-controlled ground. The silence on the radio wasn't comforting. It was the kind that made your gut tighten, the kind that meant something was coming, but no one knew what. Then the call came. Contact. Contact. Multiple hostiles, 10 o'clock. Moving fast. The voice was sharp. No fear. Just urgency. Sarah banked left, her A-10 tilting into the black. She scanned the ground, thermal imaging switching on. Red shapes flickered across her screen. Heat signatures, too many for a random patrol. It was an ambush. She didn't ask for orders. She just moved. Eagle 1 engaging, marking hostile positions. Below her, the SEALs were pinned. She could see their shapes taking cover near the rocks, returning fire, trying to move uphill. But they were outnumbered, flanked. No room for retreat. She pulled altitude, flipped the master arm switch, and prepared for a strafing run. The cannon began to spin. In the tight cockpit, everything slowed down. Her breathing, her heartbeat. The chaos outside couldn't touch her here. This was where she belonged, between the sky and the fire. She came in low. A burst of light exploded from the A-10's cannon, tearing into the enemy's position. Dust and debris erupted like a storm. Some of the red shapes vanished from the thermal feed. Then another pass. She didn't hesitate. No second-guessing. Only control. The enemy tried to scatter, but the valley offered no cover. Her rounds were precise, brutal, and unrelenting. Targets neutralized, she called out. You're clear to move. There was a pause. Then a voice crackled through. Copy that, Eagle 1. Moving. You just saved our skins. She allowed herself a breath. Just one. But it wasn't over yet. She spotted movement on the ridge. 2 enemy vehicles. Small, fast, closing in from the north. Reinforcements. Sarah climbed fast, recalculated, and turned into them. They didn't expect her to come back so soon. She did. And this time, she wasn't playing defense. She dropped altitude again, locked on, and fired. Both vehicles erupted in flame, vanishing in a single scream of smoke and metal. On the ground, the team was already moving out of the valley. Their path was clear now. Safe. Because above them, one pilot had turned the tide. And the SEAL captain, listening from command back at base, heard every word, every shot, every moment she kept his men alive. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. But he knew. Whatever doubts had existed before, they were gone now. This wasn't just about flying a plane. This was about trust. And Sarah Thompson had just earned it in the most unforgiving place on earth. By the time she landed, the sun was starting to rise. She climbed out of the cockpit, covered in sweat, her flight suit streaked with dust. Mechanics nodded at her as she passed. Quiet respect. Back in the operations tent, the SEAL captain waited. He looked up as she entered. You were the reason they made it back, he said. She nodded once. Just doing my job, sir. He didn't smile, but his voice softened. You did more than that, Lieutenant. You proved who you are when it mattered most. The next mission wasn't on the schedule. No time for briefings. No time for backup. It started with a call at 2:17 a.m. One of the forward SEAL units had gone dark. No updates. No coordinates. Just a single distress ping from a battered transmitter somewhere near the eastern ridge. A zone no one wanted to enter unless they had to. Sarah was still in her flight suit when the call came. She didn't ask questions. She just walked straight to the flight line. Her bird was being refueled. She waved the ground crew to hurry. Eyes sharp. Mind already ahead of the moment. She didn't need a full plan. She needed a chance to act. The captain caught her halfway down the runway. We lost comms with Hammer Team. Last known location is close to enemy resupply lines. Intel says they're surrounded. She didn't stop walking. I'll find them. It's a bad window. Too dark. No SAT coverage. And there's chatter on local frequencies. They might be baiting us. Sarah paused. Looked him in the eye. Then let me be the hook. He didn't argue. He knew better now. Minutes later, the A-10 roared into the night. The stars above were clear, but the ground below was shadows and jagged earth. Visibility was near zero. The only light came from the instrument panel and the faint glow of the eastern horizon. She scanned for the signal. Static. Nothing. Then a flicker. An encrypted pulse. Faint but familiar. She locked on. Her heart beat slower now. Calm. Focused. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a race against time. If the SEALs were alive, they were outnumbered. Trapped. Wounded. If they weren't, she'd still go in. That's what it meant to fly for them. 10 miles out, she caught the heat signatures. Too many. It was a full enemy column. At least 20 fighters, maybe more, moving through the valley like they owned it. But something wasn't right. No formation. No heavy weapons. Just speed. Urgency. They were chasing someone. She angled lower, switched to thermal, and saw them. 5 SEALs moving between rocks and trees, low to the ground. One of them dragging another. Injured. Bleeding. Barely staying ahead. They didn't know she was there yet. She dropped even lower. The ground rose fast. Trees and cliffs rushed past. She brought the A-10 to its lowest safe altitude and hit the mic. Hammer Team, this is Eagle 1. I've got eyes on you. There was no reply. She tried again. This is Eagle 1. Signal your location. Then, faintly, a red flare cut through the dark. Low. Desperate. She saw it. And she dove. The enemy wasn't ready. The roar of the cannon shattered the silence. Bursts of fire cut into the chasing line. Bodies scattered. Dust exploded. Some dropped to the ground. Others fled. But she wasn't finished. She turned hard, came back around, and laid down another burst precisely between the SEALs and their attackers. A wall of fire to buy them time. Then she opened the emergency channel. Extraction team, coordinates locked. I need boots on the ground now. They won't survive another hour. On the ground, one of the SEALs looked up. His voice cracked through the comms. Eagle 1, we knew you'd come. It was all she needed to hear. She circled above them like a hawk, keeping the sky clear until the extraction team arrived. It took 17 minutes. 17 minutes of tight circles, watching every shadow, scanning every ridge, her finger never leaving the trigger guard. When the Black Hawk finally landed and pulled the team out, she didn't leave right away. She stayed until the last man was lifted. Only then did she return to base. No applause. No speeches. Just a quiet voice on the radio. All accounted for. Mission complete. And 5 lives that would have been lost, saved by a pilot no one expected, but everyone now believed in. When she landed, the runway lights looked softer than usual. The night had stretched longer than expected, and the desert air clung to her flight suit like a second skin. Sarah climbed down from the cockpit without a word. Her boots hit the tarmac, steady and silent. No cameras, no fanfare, just a tired mechanic nodding as she walked by. Inside the operations tent, the SEAL captain was waiting. He stood with his arms crossed, a tablet in one hand, eyes scanning the latest report. As she stepped through the flap, he looked up. Their eyes met. There was no need for a salute. You stayed longer than you had to. I wasn't leaving until they were all clear, she replied. He held up the tablet. You do realize what you just pulled off? That was textbook precision. For enemy vehicles destroyed. 2 full-fire teams neutralized. And not a single friendly casualty. Sarah didn't blink. I've read worse reports. He set the tablet down. Some of these guys, they didn't believe it when command said you were leading air cover. They thought it was a mistake. Thought it was some kind of joke. I've heard that before, she said quietly. They're not laughing now. There was a pause. Not tense. Just thoughtful. Do you know what one of my men said when I asked how they made out? Sarah shook her head. He said, we stopped thinking about the enemy once we heard her cannon. We knew we were going to make it. That landed heavier than anything else that day. Because it wasn't about medals or praise or reports. It was about trust. The kind that doesn't come from a uniform or a rank. It comes from action. From doing exactly what you say you'll do when everything is falling apart. The captain walked toward her and offered his hand. Lieutenant Thompson, you've earned more than just my respect. You've earned this team's trust. That's not given lightly around here. She shook his hand. Firm. Professional. No words needed. Outside the tent, the sun was beginning to rise. The base stirred slowly, engines warming, boots crunching gravel, distant voices rising with the morning wind. But in that moment, Sarah stood still. She'd flown dozens of missions, faced down fire, rescued teams under the worst conditions. But this was different, because now they saw her, not as a novelty, not as an exception, as a pilot, as a warrior, as one of them. Later that morning, while she sat quietly in the mess hall with a tray of cold eggs and weak coffee, 2 SEALs walked in. They didn't say anything at first. Then one of them sat across from her, pulled off his cap, and said, "You flew cover for us last night." She looked up. "I did." He nodded. "I've never seen a pilot do what you did. That low, that fast. You kept us alive." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "We talked about it afterward," he added. "We're glad it was you up there." Then he stood, nodded again, and left. The second SEAL just gave her a simple, quiet thumbs up before following him out. No applause. No cheers. Just quiet, steady recognition. Exactly the way she preferred it. Because real respect isn't loud. It's earned in silence, in grit, in the space between risk and survival. And that morning, Sarah Thompson wasn't just a pilot anymore. She was someone they'd remember. Someone they'd follow. Someone they trusted without question. The mission board had a new name on it now. Not buried at the bottom. Not penciled in as a backup. This time, Lieutenant Sarah Thompson's name was listed first, highlighted, underlined, and assigned to lead air support for the most critical operation of the month. Operation Iron Shield. A joint force mission involving multiple SEAL units, recon teams, and a convoy that had to make it through a hostile corridor within a tight 20-minute window. No airspace flexibility. No room for delay. One mistake, and they'd lose not just gear, but men. And they'd chosen her. The captain didn't say much about it. He didn't need to. When the assignment came down, all he did was hand her the mission folder with a small nod. "You're up." Sarah took it without hesitation. She spent the next 6 hours buried in maps, heat reports, flight patterns, and contingency plans. Every valley, every fallback point, every escape route. Memorized. Locked in. She wasn't preparing for a fight. She was preparing to make sure no one else had to fight harder than they needed to. At 0400, the flight deck came alive. Engines rumbled. Steel boots echoed. Orders passed through radios like static-filled prayers. Her A-10 was already prepped. Her ground crew worked in silence now. No questions, no glances. They knew who she was. She climbed into the cockpit with the kind of calm that only came from repetition under pressure. The seat molded to her like an old friend. Her hands moved across switches like they were part of her skin. She took off with the sunrise at her back. The sky was clear, the air thin. Below her, the convoy rolled out, armor trucks, Humvees, and foot soldiers moving together through dust and tension. She flew ahead of them like a shadow. At 17 minutes into the mission, the first threat appeared. A ridge just east of the pass, too quiet. No birds, no heat, just stillness. And then flashes. Rocket trails lit the hillside. Eagle 1, we've got incoming fire, right side ridge. Sarah didn't wait. She banked hard, nose down, eyes locked on the ridge. The cannon spun to life. Her fingers squeezed. Rounds tore into the rock and smoke. Enemy positions erupted. Dirt flew. A launcher flew into the air and crashed down in pieces. Ridge cleared, she called. Convoy, keep moving. But it wasn't over. Another alert. Movement behind them. Motorbikes, fast, agile, closing from the rear. They weren't just fighting from the front. They were being hunted from behind. Sarah wheeled around, flipping her targeting system mid-flight. Locked on. Fired. 2 bikes vanished in fire and dust. The others scattered. No one got through. By the time the convoy reached the checkpoint, the route was clear. Not by luck, not by accident, but because one pilot had cleared the sky, the hills, and every danger in between. Sarah circled one last time before heading back to base. As she landed, word had already spread. She didn't need a debrief. Everyone who mattered already knew. When she walked into the operations tent, the SEAL captain stood waiting. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't need to. He handed her a fresh mission folder. This one's classified. Bigger. Riskier. They want our best. Sarah opened the folder. Scanned the details. Closed it. When do I fly? The captain smiled for the first time. You tell us. That's when it was clear. She wasn't the exception anymore. She was the standard. And in a world that never expected her to stand up, she'd soared instead.